Hello and welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. I'm Tim Hayes. I'm your host for the first hour, and today is Tuesday, February 4th, 2025. As always, we're grateful to everyone who's joining us here today, whether you're listening live or through the archives, as we spend another couple of hours teaching and supporting people in using some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools I've ever encountered. These tools are available absolutely free through the tireless efforts of Dr. Michael and Jeanie Ryce on the website at whyagain.org. If you go to that website and click on the two words that say Start Here in the upper left-hand corner, it will take you to a page where you can download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Michael Ryce's book. His book is titled, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And that chapter of the book contains a narrative description and explanation of the primary tool in this work. That tool is called the Reality Management Worksheet, sometimes called the Reality Management Wake-Up Sheet. And it's a tool I've been using to great effect for over 20 years now to improve the quality of my life and most of my relationships, and to turn any negative emotional experience I have into part of the infallible guidance system that each and every one of us has been given. You can also download the actual worksheet process itself. It's a simple PDF file. Click the link, download it, print it off, copy it as often as you'd like, and use it over and over again absolutely free. You can also download a whole host of audio files of shows just like this one, where people have been stepped through that worksheet process. And if you choose to listen to them even repeatedly, they can serve as a powerful tutorial for you to help you get maximum benefit from these tools in the shortest amount of time possible. You can also go to your app store and type in the three words Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness. And if you choose to do that before you're done typing the word forgiveness, you'll see the glowing heart icon. If you tap on that, it will let you download a completely free and private app that contains the Reality Management Worksheet. It contains an abbreviated version of that worksheet process, and it contains a copy of the Drag-On Kling-On game, which is a wonderful way to introduce these tools to even younger audiences. And we hope people do all of that soon and often, primarily because it tends to improve the quality of people's lives the more they actively apply these tools in their lives. And secondarily, because it tends to prompt comments, questions, answers, and testimonials. If you have any of those to share with us, we'd appreciate you doing so. You can email me at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org, or you can email Jeanie at jeanie@whyagain.org. That's whyagain.org. And if we get a comment or a question from you, a testimonial, we'll address it on the internet show, and then as time allows, send you a notification about what day and time that occurred, so you can listen back to the archives for your feedback or input. And we greatly appreciate whenever anybody chooses to do that, because it makes it infinitely easier for us to live into our intention with this work. The intention we have with this work is to be of service, and that is just loads easier to do when we know how these things are landing for you. So please let us know. If you are listening live at live.needle.com/mindshiftersradio, we appreciate you being here, and we're glad you're listening. If, however, you want to make a comment or actually talk to us directly, you need to download the Needle app. It's NEDL, AI for Live Radio Tuner, from your app store. Once you download that app and log in, we encourage you to favorite or like the show, so that every time one of us goes live, you'll get a notification. And we'd be greatly appreciative to hear your comments and questions, because that makes this far more likely that whatever is transpiring here today is going to be something that somebody wants to listen to again and again. The highlight shows, the best of shows, that the vast majority of them over the last 14 years have been the product of people like you, just like you, calling and asking a question. So please let us know how we can be of support and or how these things are landing. Where I was reading yesterday, I left off when I'm reading from the book Being Peace by Thich Nhat Hanh. And in this section, he's talking about Tiep Hien, which is this idea of being right here, fully awake and aware in the present moment. And then he launched into talking about 14 mindfulness trainings. And we've covered the first 5. And the 6th mindfulness training is as follows, quote, aware that anger blocks communication and creates suffering, we are determined to take care of the energy of anger when it arises and to recognize and transform the seeds of anger that lie deep in our consciousness. When anger comes up, we are determined not to say or do anything but to practice mindful breathing or mindful walking and acknowledge, embrace, and look deeply into our anger. We will learn to look with the eyes of compassion at those we think are the cause of our anger. Now, this is a Buddhist training. This is the 6th of the 14 mindfulness trainings. And this is the essence of what the best of Guy Finley and Michael Ryce and Michael Singer all talk about. It's not about denying or suppressing my anger, and it's certainly not about blaming it on anyone else. And the world could be transformed in a heartbeat if every time someone had anger, they were able to turn inside, be aware that this is an energy arising inside of them, be aware that it's got information for them, and refuse to speak or act based on that anger until they understand it more completely. So here's the first paragraph from the 6th mindfulness training. Aware that anger blocks communication and creates suffering, we are determined to take care of the energy of anger when it arises and to recognize and transform the seeds of anger that lie deep in our consciousness. When anger comes up, we are determined not to do or say anything, but we are determined to practice mindful breathing or mindful walking and acknowledge, embrace, and look deeply into our anger. We will learn to look with the eyes of compassion at those our mind is telling us are causing our anger, at those we think are the cause of our anger. And the core of these teachings, whether it's Michael Ryce and the Reality Management Worksheet or Michael Singer or Guy Finley or Dale Allen Hoffman or Thich Nhat Hanh, it is all about recognizing that I create my emotional experience. I create my experience of life and every emotion that I experience. And rather than numbing out from them, rather than taking the traditional cultural perspective of scanning the environment to figure out who I need to blame or attack or run away from or seduce or bribe to get them to change so I don't have to feel this energy inside of me, we are offering an invitation to turn inside and recognize the seeds of anger that live deep in our consciousness. that no one outside of me, no thing outside of me has ever made me feel angry. If I throw an interpretation on the unfolding of life events as they seem to be hitting my senses, that has the same resonant energy as anger that already lives inside of me, I'm going to feel that energy. If I do the work of owning it and looking deeper and deeper into my consciousness and understanding the seeds of that energy, understanding the message that that energy is giving me, understanding the error in the interpretation that I have placed on the life events that are unfolding around me. Now I've got a lot to work with. Now I'm in a whole different realm. It's hard for me to communicate fully how many times I've, even in the last 20 some years of working with Dr. Michael Ryce's work and being in this community and being in the support group and being on the internet show, how many times I've interacted with people who show all of the signs, the outward signs of tone of voice and raised volume and clenched teeth and accusations of others that I would interpret as having anger up for them, and they deny it. And they either say, oh no, I'm just passionate, or they say, no, I'm not being angry, you're just misinterpreting it, etc. And yet, this sixth mindfulness training says the value that comes when we recognize the anger arising within us and we refuse to act from it. When anger comes up, we are determined not to do or say anything. Imagine how your life would change if instead of getting triggered to words or action when you felt the energy of anger come up in you, you got triggered to this practice that you have developed, to this new habit you've developed of turning inside and with childlike curiosity asking, passionately exploring what's going on inside of me. How am I creating this energy of pain or fear or sadness or anger or hurt? And when my mind wants to tell me, oh, you're angry because he or she did this or that, or because this didn't happen or that didn't happen, or because this happened and it shouldn't be, instead of listening and assuming that my thoughts are accurate whenever there's this energy of anger up in my sensorium, in my mind, in my awareness, I assume my mind is not accurate at this point in time. I assume that anger blocks communication and anger creates suffering. So I can't listen to what my mind tells me when I'm angry because it's just going to create more suffering. It's just going to block more communication. Imagine how your life would change if you trained yourself to that new habit of responding to the energy as it arises in you that you've learned to call anger. The paragraph beyond this goes in the Sixth Mindfulness Training. Thich Nhat Hanh writes, we have to be aware of irritation or anger as it arises and try to understand it. Once we understand, we are better able to forgive and love. Meditation on compassion means meditation on understanding. If we do not understand, we cannot love. Or I'll restate that as we cannot extend love. Here's a quote from the Lotus Sutra chapter. Quote, learn to look at other beings with the eyes of compassion. You might like to write this down and put it in your sitting room. The original Chinese is only 5 words. Compassionate eyes, looking, living beings. The first time I recited the Lotus Sutra, when I came to these 5 words, I was silenced. I knew that these 5 words are enough to guide my whole life. And those 5 words again are compassionate eyes, looking, living beings. So just for the exercise, just for the fun of it, imagine what would happen if every time you felt the energy arising in you that you've learned to call anger, that you relabeled it as an alarm system that's there to indicate to you that there's something inaccurate about what you're perceiving or about the interpretation you've chosen and placed on life events. Because here in the Sixth Mindfulness Training from Thich Nhat Hanh's book, Being Peace, he says, we are aware that anger blocks communication and creates suffering. And as such, we're determined to take care of the energy of anger when it arises within us, understanding that it's coming from within us, its cause is within us, its cause is not somewhere outside of us. And we will learn to recognize and transform the seeds of that energy that we call anger, those seeds that lie deep in our consciousness. They're not out there in the world. They're not out there in the life events. My anger isn't caused by Sally standing me up for a lunch meeting. My anger isn't caused by somebody doing something harmful or hurtful to someone that I say I love. It's an energy response within me that is best processed through understanding, through questioning. And what they recommend here is that I choose to not say or do anything until I have understood the energy arising within me. When anger comes up, we're determined not to do or say anything. We are determined to practice mindful breathing and or mindful walking and acknowledge, embrace, and look deeply into our anger. Just imagine how your life would change, how your choice of responding in different situations would change if you were able to make that a habit and then strengthen it to the point where it became a default habit in your life. Compassionate eyes looking, living beings. What if you could look at everyone through compassionate eyes, even when your mind is trying to tell you that that person is the one who's causing your anger? And you can only do that if you've trained yourself to understand that your anger does not come from outside of you. Your anger is not a useful response to the events that unfold around you. So again, we're about 19 or 20 minutes into our first hour here today. I just want to remind people that we're welcoming comments and questions, or you can type it in the comment section of your app, or you can actually raise your hand to speak. And that is welcome, as always. No one has a hand up, so I will read the 7th Mindfulness Training from Thich Nhat Hanh's book, Being Peace. And he writes, aware that life is available only in the present moment, and that it is possible to live happily in the here and now, we are committed to training ourselves to live deeply each moment. Susan Bingham, I see that your hand is up. I'm hoping that you can connect. Are you available?
Hi, Dr. Tim.
Yes.
Hi. You're on to one of my most puzzling topics, and I bet that's true for many people. I think most of us who have been on the radio show and used the tools and read The Course in Miracles and The Way of Mastery and other things intend to catch whatever flash of anger shows up early and do some form of wake up sheet, some kind of awareness, self awareness, readjustment, even admitting that this is our stuff, we're doing it. Is there any hope to get beyond that, to actually not have that flash of anger happen at all? I've come to the conclusion that for me, it isn't. The best I can do is do what Thich Nhat Hanh is saying to do, aware that the anger is right there and it's going to pop up now and again. So that's my question.
So the question is there any hope that you might reach a point where one day you don't generate anger?
Right.
Well, I don't know about, the absolute truth or answer to that question. What I can tell you from my own life experience is that the more I actively use these tools, the more I actively train myself to question whatever arises from the perspective of, oh, I wonder how this is going to work out even better than what I had planned. No
Right.
matter what arises, the more I do that in that process, the less negative energy or less time I spend experiencing negative emotions in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So, will it ever get to the point where I never have another angry negative emotion? I don't know. But as I've talked about it on the show before, I don't think I want that to happen because I think it's part of the guidance system that's been designed to help me wake up whenever I'm in error in
Mm.
my thought process or in my perception.
I remember Michael Ryce saying the littlest flash of anger indicates or is a shows you that there's a great deal of anger there.
Well, if it's from the Course in Miracles where it says, the slightest irritation is connected to the deepest rage.
Yeah. So it's a tall assignment. I like that you say this is a corrective thing, that it shows you when you're in error. We also probably need some kind of discernment that might even look like anger in order to take action when true injustice has been taking
Well,
place or
I'm I'm
something.
I'm here to I'm here to tell you I think that that's just what's been trained into you. There's a
Okay.
belief in the culture that says you've got to have anger to take action,
Okay.
and that's not been my experience. So many people act, think about the author that we're reading right now, Thich Nhat Hanh.
Mm,
He was in Vietnam during the
right.
war.
Right.
He acted. He and his young friends on a regular basis. He talked about it earlier in this book that they would routinely put themselves in the middle of these conflicts and try to help both sides understand the other just to cease the violence and
Mm,
cease the suffering.
mm-hmm.
They took action, but they weren't doing it out of anger.
Yeah.
They were refusing to go to anger. They were staying in that space of being lovingly connected to their source
Mm-hmm.
and acting from there.
I can totally understand that. I went to, it was called bioenergetics. Have you ever heard that word? It was a guy named John Paracas. I've mentioned him before, long ago on the radio show, I think. Somebody Tim Bingham was working with. And I went with Tim to a retreat once, and he put me on, it was kind of body work, and he put me on the floor, got on top of me, sort of straddled, and spit in my face, expecting that I would be enraged. And when I wasn't, I was just puzzled. I thought, why would you do that? You don't even know me. That was my genuine feeling, was not rage, but just puzzled, being puzzled. And he got frustrated. He didn't know what to do with me because I didn't have the normal response of blowing up at him. And I think in a situation like Vietnam, I can understand why you'd want to work on both sides, and it wouldn't be anger that triggered it. The stupid things that trigger my anger are just absolutely ridiculous. Like uh, I I'm opening a cupboard and the door flashes back and bops me in the head. And I want to rip the door off the cupboard. It's dumb things. What is that?
Well, it's based on, and this is a wonderful example that you gave about this bioenergetics. And what's, you know, truly wonderful is that this person, if he or she was observing rather than going from their belief system,
Yeah.
they would have been able to tap into something deeply true and beneficial, which is you didn't generate anger in that situation because you interpreted what was happening as something to be curious about
Mm.
rather than as something to be angry about.
Well, and he
And
was
it's
a
the
therapist.
right,
And
but it's the interpretation that you put on it that generated your emotional response.
right, and my interpretation, not only curious, but I thought, this is a man who's trying to work with me. I really appreciate that. I wonder what he's doing. Yeah, I just took it a little further. What went through my mind wasn't anger at all. But okay,
Exactly. But
so
so here's the deal. When that happened, you put an interpretation on it that allowed you to have curiosity and generated curiosity. When you open a cabinet door and don't close it the right way and it smacks you on the back of the head, you interpret that as something to be rageful about. Oh, I'm so stupid, or this darn door, or I hate that I can't pay attention, whatever it is. And
yeah,
that's what generates this energy flow that you're experiencing as anger. And if you start training yourself to this practice, at the earliest warning sign of tension, anger, frustration, hurt, or confusion, if you take that calming breath and turn the focus inside yourself and ask, how am I doing this? Or
yeah,
how is this going to work out even better than what I had planned? Because this isn't how I had planned to spend my day, or, you know,
yeah,
this isn't what I planned to have happen today. If you start doing that, chances are really good you'll start to spend the tiniest fraction of time in your day in the negative emotional states, and you'll minimize the number of things that you interpret as being important to get angry about.
yeah. I think the work helps us do that. I used to just I'd throw chairs, I'd throw shoes, I'd yell. My kids grew up with a yelling mother, and I'm sure I hurt them. And now I realize I've got this whole alternate universe that happens if the cabinet door hits me. See, even I said it that way. It had an evil intention, a bad intention toward me. It wanted to hurt me.
Exactly. And that's your interpretation,
Yeah,
which comes from your life experience. And if you start programming it differently, you'll get different results.
well, I've been doing that. But in this scenario, I go through a whole dialogue. I either hit the cabinet door or I look at it and say, F you, or I say, oh my God, I did it again. I apologize. I'm talking to the door.
Okay, so instead of that so much, keep it more internal
Hmm.
and have the dialogue with yourself about what you're doing with this childlike curiosity. Oh, look, there I go again. Isn't that silly?
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, who in my family of origin set this precedent for me that I downloaded this. You can look at it through Dr. Michael Ryce's power person dynamic situation
Mm. Oh, sure.
and,
That's.
and, and see the programming and
Mm-hmm.
who did I have in my life as I was being raised that I saw as an authority figure. And they did it that way and they survived. So this must be important for me to do it this way so that I survive, even though it doesn't make any sense logically to be
That's
yelling
good.
at a cabinet door, etc.
All right.
No, you and I have this ongoing agreement that if somebody else raises a hand while
Oh,
you're on the
yeah.
phone, that so
Definitely.
I'm turning on the microphone for or inviting Yin. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Thanks for having me on, Doctor. Great show. And
Is
Susan,
this
thanks for
Allende?
sharing. What's that?
Are you Allende?
I am, yes. I
Oh,
just I
thank
I
you
just
for
wanted to
your.
share something really quick that occurred to me when you were sharing your story.
Yeah,
And it just feels like it's so right there and so simple. I just wanted to share it real quick.
love it.
When you were telling me your story, I went into judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, she paid for this thing where somebody would sit on her and spit on her? And
Right.
and so, but it actually opened up something else, because after I came out of that judgment, I thought, well, we all come into this life and we all choose to come into this life. So if Susan chose to look at this entire life creation as her therapist wanting to do something for her, then the door snapping back on your forehead is a curious thing. Does that make sense?
How do you mean at the end? The door thing is a curious thing.
Yeah. So like when things happen that don't work the way
Yeah.
The
that we
way,
expect them
yeah,
to,
the way you expect them to.
we're
Right.
looking at it more as a curious thing, like, what is this trying to teach me?
So
Yeah.
As
Allende,
opposed to
so Allende, are you saying that you're inviting her to put the same kind of questioning interpretation on the cabinet door as she did with the therapist sitting on top of her, spitting in her face?
precisely, Dr. Tim. Yes.
That's very nice. There's one thing missing for me in that, and that is that the cabinet door isn't a thinking entity who has a good intention. The cabinet door is absolutely just at my at my beck and call. It's something that I use.
Well,
It
to
isn't.
invite Dr. Tim's way of saying it, I invite you to look at the cabinet door as a part of yourself and as part of the creation that is the conference that you've paid money to attend. Like, it's all part of it.
I can see the cabinet door as teaching me, as certainly I could learn from what I keep doing with cabinet doors that bop me in the head. And I shouldn't even put it that way because that's saying that they do it on purpose.
Exactly.
So I know they don't do it on purpose.
Well, they're not doing anything.
They are so, Dr. Tim.
No, they are not doing it. They're just sitting there until you take an action or some other person takes an action. Look at how you've got it constructed in your mind. And this is what Allende is inviting you to do. Look at the interpretation, the storyline you're creating around cabinet doors doing something to you.
Well, I mean, and she's and Susan is, you're comfortable thinking of the therapist as doing something to you,
Yeah.
right? Because
Hmm.
y- what I'm inviting is to stop thinking of inanimate objects as inanimate objects, because everything has a soul. Everything is made of everything. Everything is made of the same cellular. Everything is made of the same um,
Energy.
atoms and the same, and it's all one thing.
Hmm.
So my invitation is don't look at the cabinet door or your therapist that spat on you differently.
I understand. And when you say the cabinet door has, did you say some level of consciousness or a soul? Or what did you say about the
I
cabinet door?
believe everything has a level of consciousness. I mean, it's a different level, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's my own personal belief. I do believe it all has a level of consciousness. We imbue it as we interact with it, as we create it, as we turn the corner and we see it all there, and
Mm,
we have an expectation that they're going to stay in the same places and not move by themselves, right? But
right.
we are my invitation to you is, as an exercise, see the cabinet door as, someone that you have employed to be a part of your teaching.
Mm, I could do that. In fact, it, that's one of the layers of getting back to sanity is I do that. But the flash is primitive. It's primal. It's immediate and it's powerful. And I'm just mind boggled that I still have that kind of the strength of that kind of primitive response. I quickly step away from it. I do the breathing, I do my thinking. I sometimes apologize to the cabinet door because I've blamed it for intentions that it it just doesn't have. But when you say it has a soul, I was even saying that this door is so innocent, it doesn't even have a soul to choose to bop me in the head. And now you're saying it has a soul, but it has a benevolent soul that's there to serve me. And it would never bop me in the head on purpose. It would just accidentally be in the
Well,
way. And I would,
Well,
yeah.
your therapist bopped you in the head on purpose. I mean, spat in your face on purpose, sat on you on purpose, but for a
I know it.
specific reason. And
Right.
as Dr. Tim is saying, because you knew that their reason was for you, you
Mm-hmm.
knew you didn't interpret it as something to be angry about. You interpreted it as something to be curious about, and that curiosity prevented any kind of primal
Right.
anger.
That totally did.
All
That's
right.
true.
Thank you so much for letting me join in. I just wanted to share that little bit. Hopefully, it's helpful. God bless you.
Yeah. Allende, thank you for the new needle program. We would be stuck without this.
Oh my God. Thank you so much for saying that. Um, and I'm the wrong person to thank for it because it is, we're all conscious people here. So it is through God that has delivered this through me. And it is through so many investors, people in my family who've believed in me, everything, friends, especially friends.
How
So
great is that, though? That's fabulous.
thank you.
Yeah.
God bless you guys. We'll talk to you soon.
God
All right.
bless you
Thank
too,
you.
Allende.
Thank
Blessings.
you, Dr.
So again, I would just boil that down whether or not you want to think in terms of consciousness or lack of consciousness, but see how when you throw a certain interpretation on something, that's what creates your experience of it. And that's what you
Yeah.
end up generating through
Mm-hmm.
resonance or whatever else,
Yeah.
your experience of your emotional state.
Mm-hmm. And that's exactly right. It is so much at an immediate primal level that I haven't intercepted it at its root yet. Something happens, and then I say, oh boy, there it is again. I'd love to get to the point where it doesn't even happen. That was my question is, do you ever get there?
Well, I don't know, right? I certainly haven't gotten there myself, and yet I have gotten the experience that the more I do this, actively engage this practice, the less time I spend in my day in the negative emotional
Oh,
states.
yeah, totally true. That's true.
And I keep thinking of, oh, it just went right out of my head. Um, but if the idea comes back, I'll share it with you.
Okay. I hate that when that happens. So frustrating.
So just think in terms of your interpretation, and you might choose. And oh, here's what I was going to say is in the realm of homeopathic and holistic and functional medicine, often um, people will ask, well, how long do I have to do this treatment? How long do I have to take these vitamins? How long do I have to practice this exercise or stretching or whatever? And one of the things that I've heard for years from people who go to these practitioners is that a general rule of thumb is that the practitioner will ask you to engage in the healing process for at least, at a minimum, 1 month for every year that the problem has been developing.
Oh, I'll be long dead by then, Dr. Tim. Oh, my goodness. That's not encouraging at all.
Well, wait a minute. Did you think my job was to encourage you? Are you operating under the false assumption that I'm here just to throw you a bone and make you feel better about yourself without giving you something that would
Absolutely.
actually work?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm more inclined to start trying to give you things that might actually work rather than things that just make you feel better.
Well, you could have both here and there.
Well, I think it is both. I think that both will end up happening, but it just
Mm.
won't be the way your mind tells you it should be.
160 years old, is that it? Or, 155 or,
Well, I didn't say a year for every year. I said a month
oh,
for every year.
okay. That's still a long time, but thanks. That's good.
Well, and the benefit is that I get the benefit. I mean, the hopeful part is I start feeling the benefits early on in the process.
Yeah.
Not I have to wait until 17 years have passed before I see any benefit. I start feeling less angry, less intense for shorter periods of time right off the bat when I engage a process like this. When I
Yeah.
wake up and recognize I'm the one creating the interpretation that's resonating whatever emotions I'm experiencing, it takes me instantly out of the blame game.
Mm-hmm.
It takes
Totally.
me it takes me into a place of competence and self-efficacy,
Mm-hmm.
and so I start to feel better the first few times I do it.
Yeah.
And now that I've been doing it for some 20 years, I can tell you it is, an absolute boon to my life to have
Mm-hmm.
been willing to take up the tools and apply them on a regular basis in my life.
Mm.
I wouldn't have, you know, a fraction of the good stuff in my life today that I have if I hadn't been actively applying these tools, because the good stuff in my life is not material things.
Yeah.
It's the hours of the day that I spend where I'm okay.
Yeah.
As Michael Singer would say, learn to be okay with whatever happens.
Yeah.
And I can, one of his last podcasts, he was talking about learning to prefer everything,
Oh.
learning to extend that energy of preference to everyone and everything. Like the Einstein quote says, we have to extend that special affection to everyone in all of creation, and that's how we remove ourselves from the prison that we were creating. The prison that gets created when we hold on to a special affection for certain people and things closest to us.
Mm. That is such a good thing to be reminded of. Mm.
So I end up, you know, every little thing that happens, I end up saying, oh, I wonder how this is going to work out better than what I had planned. I wonder how this is going to have me meeting people I wouldn't have met any other way.
Yeah.
right? I wonder how this is going to turn into a blessing, or I wonder how this holds a lesson that I need to learn to move myself to the next level in my life. And every time I start feeling these negative emotional states, and I recognize it and catch it and take to the breath and turn the focus inside, and then start asking those questions, my life gets better and better and
Mm,
better.
mm,
And I start to see connections, coincidences, little miracles, if you will, that I
mm-hmm.
would never have seen if I was charging forth from my anger,
Yeah.
or trying to speak or act or sit spinning thinking from my anger. So I don't know. Will it ever get? I'm of the opinion at this stage of the game that I don't want to get to the place where I never get angry, because that would be like putting blinders on. And I want to be, and this is what I was talking about earlier in the reading. I want to get to the place where I'm so practiced at
Mm,
recognizing my anger that I catch it at the earliest warning signs, and I move out of the space where I used to blame others.
mm-hmm.
Right? I move away from the rationalizations that my mind creates because I know better. My mind will still create the rationalizations. The Way of Mastery says that in lesson 3. It says it doesn't mean you won't get angry. Just stop fooling yourself into thinking that your anger is justified.
Oh, I love it. That's great right there. Mm,
It means to dismantle every judgment and every perception. And as I do that, I dismantle the judgments and the perceptions. I usher myself deeper and deeper into what it calls the purity of my own consciousness. And in light of the Thich Nhat Hanh reading, that takes on a new meaning. It says, oh no, I get to see how I've created this energy that I'm experiencing as anger.
oh, yeah.
But I only get to see that if I take 100% responsibility for what's getting generated in me. And then I'm willing to dismantle the judgments and the perceptions, which are all distortions. They are all creations of this process that we call perception within my mind. And the more I dismantle that and ask to be shown from the truth of life itself, the more I see about the truth of the world around me and the truth of my own core nature, my own consciousness, as they talk about in the Way of Mastery.
Who was it? I mean, this Byron Katie, and there's a man who's written a book, Whatever Occurs or Whatever Takes Place, love that.
Matt Kahn,
Oh, yeah, Matt Kahn.
Kahn.
Right. And Byron
Whatever
Katie's
arises, love that.
love that. And she wrote a book, Loving What Is.
Yes. And
When
another
you,
book, A Thousand Names for Joy, etc.
oh, that's a fantastic book. I've got to read it again. When you said, a connection wire just went through, when you said take full responsibility, that is almost the same, or maybe exactly the same as loving what is. Why does it translate into loving, but it seems to?
Well, here's this thing that I've read before, and I'm assuming I can pull this up here, but it's a quote that um, has been attributed to Joseph Campbell.
Uh,
And he says, Nietzsche was the one who did the job for me. He
uh,
said, at a certain moment in Nietzsche's life, the idea came to him of what Nietzsche called the love of your fate.
whoa.
And he says, whatever your fate is, Whatever the hell happens, you say, oh, this is what I need.
Oh, wow.
It may look like a wreck, but go through it as though it were an opportunity, a
Mm-hmm.
challenge. If
Great.
you bring love to that moment rather than discouragement or judgment, if you bring love to that moment, you will find the strength is there. Any disaster you can survive is an improvement in your character, your stature, and your
Mm,
life. What a privilege, he says. This is when the spontaneity of your own nature will have a chance to flow. And then, looking back at your life, you will see that the moments which seemed to be great failures that were followed by wreckage were really the incidents that shaped the life you have now.
mm,
You will see that this really is true. Nothing can happen to you that is not positive in this sense, even though it looks at the moment like a negative crisis, it is
mm.
not. The crisis throws you back, and when you are required to exhibit strength, it comes. So that's from Joseph Campbell,
That's
weaving in
fantastic.
the quote from Nietzsche on what
Mm.
Nietzsche called the love of your fate.
You know, Dr. Tim, the word love is a little bit a stumbling block for me because I've got a lot of cultural connections to that word. Could it be that if I substituted the word just accepting or allowing?
Absolutely. The
Okay,
acceptance, the allowance,
okay.
the the um, exploration of it
Mm-hmm.
as your fate, rather than as something that is uh, happening to you, it's happening for you.
It's the assumption that everything is there for your good.
Yes, yes. Whatever
Okay.
arises, love that.
Yeah.
From
Oh,
from
good.
from Matt Kahn.
Wow.
It's in Byron Katie's work. She talks about in some of her books the idea that she's come to recognize that everything that's ever happened in her life was just perfect. And how could she know it's just perfect? Because it's already happened.
Right.
And if you don't have a time machine and you can't go back and undo something, then whatever happens is what brought you to this moment in your life, and it's perfect just the way it is. And if you take that perspective, especially for all of those things that are in the past that you can't go back and change, you don't load yourself up with this distorting energy of anger or fear or sadness or hurt, and you see life more accurately, and then you make better choices.
God,
Because,
is that a great idea?
yeah, and it's
The
it's panned
business
out
of
that way in my life.
waking up in the middle of the night, I'll very often remember some dumb thing I did. And I'll go through this whole cringe session. And what a great antidote to that. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's just like any negative thought you have, you can instantly know three things. If you've got a negative thought active in your mind or a negative emotion active in your mind, you can instantly know three things. Number one, it's a lie or it's based in a falsehood. Number
Mm-hmm.
two, it's an old tape playing. It's not about the present moment. And number three, if you sit spinning in thought about it, if you speak or act from it, you're just going to make your life worse, not better. So those negative thoughts come up wherever it is, middle of the night, middle of the day, acknowledge them, have a little chuckle about it, put them over at the kiddie table with some Oreo cookies and milk, and get on with other more mature, more realistic, more balanced thoughts.
Dr.
That's the
Tim,
invitation.
that's great. This just brought to mind, it's only very tangentially relevant. I was I'm in charge of providing some food for the refugees during the day, and I only do it once a week. But I was there today, and we've got new doorbells and surveillance cameras, and we've got a guard at the doors interrogating anybody who wants to come in. All the doors are locked, and there's a there's a different feeling about the place. But I was thinking as I was getting the usual stuff together, coffee, some kind of cookies or bars, some fruit, there was one particularly a big, ferocious looking man who had just arrived, probably doesn't know any English. And it was just a nice moment that happened. Good things can happen inside of those situations. I had one cookie left in this tray. And I was walking back, cleaning up afterwards, bringing all the trolleys back to the kitchen to clean them up. One cookie. And I looked at this guy and he looked at me and I said, "You need a cookie." And of course, he didn't understand. I gave him the cookie. And you wouldn't believe the look on his face. Right then, he like lit up like a little kid. And I guess what I'm saying is any situation can yield up something so different than what we think we're in.
Yes. Yes. And they yield them up based on our creation. We are quite literally creating our experience of life in each new present moment by the choice of where we focus our conscious awareness in that moment.
Mm.
So you saw this man, and instead of focusing all of your conscious awareness on, oh my gosh, he's big, he's menacing, he could do a lot of damage here, this is going to
Yeah,
be scary, instead of that, you saw him as a person who needed a cookie, and everything transformed.
it did. It was just like a moment out of heaven.
Well, I thank you for your comments and questions, and especially for calling in. Thank you. We've had several people clapping in response.
Oh, great.
I will hang up on that call with you so I can wrap up this first hour, but Michael and Jeannie should be available for a second hour. Thanks again for the call, Susan. I'll remind us all that we come from love. We're made of the stuff that we call love. We actually are love, and everything else is false. Thank you for being here. We'll be here again tomorrow. Blessings.